another week talking about commercial real estate, everything in venture capital and venture companies as a whole. And one of the things that kind of brought us forward today thinking about this topic, right, is we have our acquisition that we're working on with Walgreens. We're working it through, and as part of that, until we get to close, we have this period of time, right, from when we sign the purchase agreement to when we actually close, sign on with the lender, sign on with all the things. And in between that, there's a whole host of things that have to be done, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of the times, I know we feel like it gets vastly overlooked, right? Especially recently with everyone getting into commercial real estate, regardless of if it's a single tenant asset to a building that's got 150 residents in it. It doesn't really matter, right? It's all kind of the same. And that period is called due diligence, right? So that's how we get from A to B to get us comfortable, our lender comfortable, our investors comfortable, our property management team, our maintenance team, everybody, because it affects everybody. Yeah. And most importantly, it affects the long-term viability of that asset, right?
And I think, first of all, thanks for everybody joining again. And Austin, you were so excited, right? You didn't even welcome our viewers today, but thanks for showing up and watching a really cool episode, because I think, Austin, you're exactly right in probably one of the largest overlooked pieces of a transaction, and one that could honestly cost you more money than you could ever imagine in a commercial real estate deal, right? I mean, we've made our mistakes, we've learned to taken our lumps, and these lumps, unfortunately, are not $200 lumps, right? In some cases, they're $100,000, $200,000 issues that if you kind of just blindly go over them, they're going to be an issue, and you as the owner, once you've moved out of that due diligence period, are going to be accepting all of the tasks, all of the costs related to taking care of that. And that due diligence period, so when you're negotiating these deals that we're taking down, how are you looking at the due diligence period and how it fits into the whole deal sometimes? Is it, because there's kind of, I'll say, starting out, there's two pieces of it. There's a finance one, which we're not going to talk about today too much, finance due diligence, and then kind of a physical due diligence, right? And when you break those up, are they always timed the same, or do they sometimes have different timings to them?
It really depends on the seller, right? We've seen it both ways, where a lot of times we usually just tie them together because it's the easiest and honestly just the simplest, right? Or if we can just tie them both for 60 days and just move forward. But then there'll be times where sellers don't want them to be tied together, right? So then we have to do something where it's like a 30 to 45 day due diligence, and then maybe our financing is 15 days beyond that or something, right? But it depends on what it is, because that's a deal that is something that maybe is stabilized, or a project like that, where then there's the deals where, like we're doing right now, is more of a redevelopment project, right? And that we have under contract with due diligence for 120 days plus, because it just takes that much time to get to the end. So it really kind of, it looks like which asset you're kind of looking at and how long that due diligence really needs to be, right? Not so that you're taking time or holding a project up, but so you're actually doing the work and the amount of time it takes to actually do the work efficiently and effectively to buy it.
And if I break down that physical due diligence, we kind of internally talk about there's kind of that beginning DD, kind of the soft stuff, and then there's that real physical DD stuff. And so those soft elements of title commitment, Alta survey, maybe even phase one and understanding some of those. Talk to me a little bit about what title commitment is, and how does it work, and who starts that process typically?
Yeah, so title commitment is really when we get a deal under contract, we give it to the title company, right, which will help us close that project. And then we basically get this, call it a 7-page document from title within a certain amount of days that tells us everything about the asset, right? Who's got the mortgage on it, if there's any liens on the property, if there's any covenants on the property, and then it gets into easements. What are easements that were there? What are different covenants or railroad things that have been tied to the property that could have went back since early 1900s to way earlier, and some of the stuff you can't even read because it's so impossible and nobody ever knows what it is. But then what we do is we layer that title commitment, so the information about the asset, into what's called an Alta survey, so that then we can see everything that's on the title commitment, right? Because like we know, getting a title commitment and reading the exceptions within it are pretty much impossible to understand.
Yep.
Like they make it impossible until you can talk with a surveyor and they can layer it in a document that then all of a sudden shows you all the boundaries and where all the utility lines are, and if there's any encroachments of a sign being over on somebody else's property, or heck, even a building being on somebody else's property, and how that all looks.
And it sounds like you're talking from experience.
Yeah,
We've had a few.
I don't think there's been many assets that we've bought that haven't had title issues, right? And a lot of people don't even look at it.
Well,
they just say, okay, we're just closing.
And that was going to be what I was going to bring up, is that, you know, there's a whole host of properties that we've purchased over the last few years, and why our process of title commitment to survey is so important to Alta, in fact, is that that's kind of the highest level of survey we can put on the property, right? Costs us a little bit more, but the protections that we get from that, not just we feel we get from them, is to be able to see that title commitment in what I'll call, take it from narrative form into a visual form, right? And so we've had sellers who we were sitting at the closing table and we're like, you guys need to fix this encroachment issue, or this, you know, something with the city. And they're like, well, we bought it this way, so why wouldn't you buy it this way? And the answer is, we don't need to buy it this way, right? We're gonna buy clean property with the easements, encroachments, all of this stuff cleaned up because of what the sellers maybe did to the property, or they bought it that way. Well, that's not our problem, right? We're gonna buy a clean piece of property, so in our asset portfolio, these properties aren't gonna have issues when we go to transact them, right?
It's almost like, if you don't get the Alta survey, you don't know what's there, so then you don't have to think about it, right?
It's risk on, right?
Yeah.
You're taking that risk. And so then we take that title commitment, those easements, and phase one, maybe just high level talk about phase one, phase two, because that can, in today's world, become a big issue when we're talking about due diligence and timing.
Yeah, I mean, environmental is probably, in today's day and age, the biggest risk in every single asset, especially as buildings have been built, tore down, unless you're building on an old farm field, right? That's about the only thing that you can look back and see. And a lot of times what we will do is we'll find an asset that we're looking to acquire, we'll go back through the Google Earth and see like what it has been in the past couple hundred years to see if it was developed before or if it was just land prior, right? Because if it was just land, we're usually pretty okay in a lot of circumstances. But when you get into spaces, especially in downtown areas, you have to have phase one.
Yeah.
I mean, lenders require it anyways, right? But it's mostly because, in a lot of times, like the rules of environmental have changed, just like the rules of everything, right? So what was okay from maybe a gas leak or any sort of environmental issue 10 years ago isn't okay today.
Yeah.
So they need something else.
And the MPCA has really changed those rules and tightened that up, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, they've allowed us to leave some contaminants in the ground because they feel Mother Earth is better to, you know, solve that problem than us digging it up and putting it on a big stockpile somewhere. So they've softened some of those when it comes to very specific contaminants, gasoline being one of them. But when you deal with dry cleaners and some of the other things that were predominantly spread throughout like a downtown, I mean, we've seen probably a handful already in the last couple of years that were contaminated with some very severe chemicals that were from that era, you know, 1900s.
We just did that owner's rep project in that building downtown, right? Where we tore it down. And there was stuff in the ground there from a gas station that wasn't there, right?
There was a gas station that was across the street. There was a dry cleaner on the site, but actually the buildings from the 1900s were actually located on the other end of the lot. So we had a lot of different things going on. And then on top of it, we found asbestos running on the heat pipes that were buried in the ground that nobody even knew existed anymore, right? Yeah. So we start demoing the building, and all of a sudden I get a call from the excavators going, hey, we found these pipes and they're wrapped in white, you know, friable material. Well, it's pretty much a guarantee it's going to be asbestos. And so, yeah, those are all things that, you know, there's, and why we talk about using contingency sometimes is because that contingency dollars are there for the God only knows stuff that you can.
And even look at like the difference of timing. I had that real look example of, we were trying to help a guy buy a 100,000 square foot office building in town, right? Well, the current owners bought it in 2017. Got a phase one, no issues. We go through phase 1 in 2020, I think, was it two? Big issues, red flags. So then they had to go back through and put it in the VIC program, get vapor barriers put in, and the whole 9 yards, right?
And didn't they actually?
It was 4 years.
And I think they refinanced the building a couple times too, didn't they? So didn't the banks work with that?
I don't know on that one.
I thought maybe it was one of the projects, but yeah. So your financial institutions are going to want to know this information. They're not giving you a loan on it, and quite honestly, at the end of the day, you want that asset value as high as you possibly can. So you're taking on an issue that's going to stay with that asset, and if you're the, I'll just say it, the 100% owner of that property, all those issues that come with are 100% yours.
Yep.
And so if we move into that physical side a little bit, we just finished one the other day that Isaac helped us film, so thanks Isaac for that. But it was an interesting walkthrough because he even said behind the camera, he started to see things that we look for in that physical due diligence. And there's probably a list of a good 10 items that, that we're going to be looking at when we look at those due diligence items. But right before that, one of the other things I wanted to mention was, in some cases, we might also, if it's a raw land deal, we might also get soil borings, right? To understand what's under the ground so that we can then represent to our buyers or our developers that, listen, this ground is good enough to build on. We might not put 20 spoons in the ground, as we would call it, but we might put 1 or 2, test holes down just to go, yeah, we're not dealing with 4 feet of overburden, or we don't have muck, or we don't have perched water, some other issues that we just want to make sure we have a general sense of what's under that ground.
Yeah.
And that would fall into that due diligence if we're just buying a raw piece of property.
Yep.
So when I think of these 10 things, and some of these will probably make you shudder a little bit because we've been through a few journeys on it, but I'll kind of overview them real quick. So roof, parking lot, windows, the envelope of the building, HVAC, fire suppression, the structure itself. The one that makes you shudder the most is probably elevators, and landscaping, then just any other amenities that might be in the parking lot, might be some ancillary buildings that we just want to understand, what they're doing. And so when we look at that roof, right, and we're up on that roof, when I'm looking at a roof, I want to understand kind of the composition of the roof. Is it a ballasted roof which has rock on it, or some kind of a weighting system that they then will loose lay the rubber compound down on the roof first and then just dump rock all over the top of it. Other times it might be a glue down roof where there's no rock or ballast. And those are easy to at least inspect, right? Because you can go around the HVAC units, you can look if there's tearing along the edges of the building. And so, but one of them that we saw the other day, which was really interesting, is the roof drains. And I don't know if you got to see the video or not yet, but what was in that roof drain that was growing that means that somebody's probably not been up there for a few years to look at that roof?
Oh, I didn't see that part.
Oh, okay.
I mean, sometimes we see trees in them.
Well, that's what was growing, right? And so that tells me that most likely somebody hasn't been up on that roof over the last couple of years to realize that. So that roof drain literally had, and we've seen them before, trees, grass are growing in those roof drains. And there's an overflow that we have to, by code, put in now, but older buildings don't always have those overflows. And so that roof drain plugs up, that water potentially could become just a giant pool up on the roof.
Yep.
And there is no doubt in my mind, when you start to pool water, the roofs are meant to shed water. They're not meant to be a bathtub.
Yeah.
And so it will leak in. And you're also putting a lot of strain on the structure itself, right? Those roofs are only supposed to pick up a certain amount of pounds of live load, and that live load is when the rain falls, it's there for a moment, and then it sheds off and the weight dissipates again. So definitely something to look at when you're absorbing that, or when you're looking at DD. And a roof in today's world could be $10 to $15 to sometimes $20 a square foot to replace now. So if all of a sudden you bought this roof and it's at the end of its lifespan, you're putting on a $500 to $1 million roof in some cases.
Yep.
And you've just negotiated what you thought was a great deal, and now you're $1 million upside down. So whether you hire somebody to do that roof inspection, or whether you do it yourself, or you do a joint effort where you do the inspections physically, put eyes on it, and you still get a roofing contractor, probably the best way to do that, right? Because then that roofing contractor can convey to you, hey, we've got a couple years left in this, or this is dead. We got to replace this roof. And then you can go back to your sellers and go, hey, we got a problem here.
But yeah, and one of the things to mention too, I think in a lot of it is that we're going to know at least the age of pretty much all of these things, right? I mean, I look at it like if we think of, when we do a DD, like we're looking at acquisitions, right? We're really focused on HVAC, roof, parking lot, elevator, and if there's main mechanical heat pumps, whatever it might be on that actual asset, because those are the things that we can get pretty quick information from a CapEx, right?
Yep.
So we'll know that information going into a deal, right? Before we put the investment analysis together, before we put anything together, we'll have funds at least put aside to understand it, right? That we know we need to look at it, but we'll know, okay, that roof is 25 years old. Okay, we have to take a good look at it, right?
Yep.
Maybe it doesn't need to be replaced today, but maybe it needs 20 to 30 grand of repairs right away. So we still got to manage for it, but then manage for the replacement.
So as you're looking at that underwriting, you're already placing in the kind of, I'll say, the knowledge of maybe it's some major repairs, maybe it's a full roof replace from a high level. So you're looking at your total development cost going, does this even work yet?
Yeah, because you're not going to know it before. You have to have something put aside and ready for it before you get into a PA. Otherwise, you're just too late, right?
Yep.
Because the whole retrade ability to just get under contract and retrade later, which retrade is just basically when I go back to the seller and say, found this, I need $1 million off. As a good buyer, that shouldn't really happen unless it's something that was hidden or is just something that wasn't ever put into the deal and there's no way for you to know about it, or it was a tenant issue, right? Because the physical stuff should be caught before.
Yeah, and do you think that, I'm going to kind of go off on a spur for a second, but when we're talking about those things, it brings up kind of the speed of real estate, right? And when you think about 2017, when you walked in here and you're like, okay, I'm learning this business and what's going on and how does this all work? Transactions were even, I'll say slower than they are today. How much have they sped up over your career so far?
I'd say they sped up a lot, especially during the 2020 to 2023 range. I would say since 24, everything's been pretty slow from a transaction standpoint. Obviously, things get under contract, but because of interest rates, because of things like that, I feel like time has slowed down, even though maybe sellers don't want it to, so they push for it. But there's not that many buyers out there.
Yeah. And do you think the speed of the transaction though, I think about in the 2017 era, didn't have DocuSign, didn't have the thing, so we'd push PAs back and forth, either physical PAs, and now the time by which somebody can put something under PA and literally purchase it, could be 30 days if they wanted to, if they had the financing in place and everything else. That transaction time just seems like it's compressed a little bit. Things move a lot faster, and so this DD also has to move extremely fast because you're going to get given 15 to 30 days, maybe 60 days on a top end from a seller. Seller just wants to move on, right? And they're going, hey guys, you're professionals. And so when you have your stuff together and you really know what you're doing, those sellers can sense that. They know when they're working with a group that's either understands the process, can move quickly through DD, because they're negotiating that way, right? Whereas if
you have a plan.
Yep. Where a non-sophisticated buyer might be bumbling through this a little bit, and they're like, well, I don't know what I'm looking at, but
sometimes the seller might want an unsophisticated buyer because it's a little bit easier to close because they don't dig into anything. They just, okay, I'm gonna go get my financing, I'm gonna close.
Yep. Parking lots have a lot of different issues going on with them, right? Yep. Especially in Minnesota. I don't know necessarily in the southern states, but we have a lot of freeze thaw. Water, is dripping off the roof all winter. All of a sudden, it catches in a pocket, starts to freeze thaw. Pretty soon, you've got a pothole city, and some of them get to be pretty bad. And so looking at those, there's repairs that can be done. Ultimately, you can go to a mill and overlay, which is kind of the mid ground, and then there's a full replacement of that parking lot.
What are the things that within the parking lot that you see as normally concerning when you're looking at it?
It's interesting because a parking lot, if you just walked out and said, I'm going to look at the parking lot, just do a quick assessment, there are inherently a couple big things that people can blow by pretty quickly. And in fact, I had a client a few years back that called me one day and they're like, hey, we've got this storm drain in the middle of our parking lot, but the dirt fell in around it and it's gone and it's collapsing faster. Well, what happened is the storm catch basin ultimately lost its connection, just wore out, the concrete pipe wore out, and then started eroding around it, right? And we see that a lot around catch basins. So when you look at a parking lot and you're just like, oh, that's a $200,000, repair. If they're going through and actually, pulling out the parking lot or noticing what's going on around those catch basins, sometimes can be a lot more. But I'm looking at the curbs. Are the curb and gutters, primarily in good shape, or is there something, major going on with shifts and cracks? I'm really looking at the cracking of the parking lot, because a crack in a parking lot, we've put in brand new parking lots, and within a year, cracks are following where where they knifed in the power to light poles and things like that. So inherently, it's just going to happen. But what we're really looking at is when it becomes, as we call it, like alligator skin, where it's just like it's broken up, the pieces are 2 inches, it's flaking out of itself. That area is either subject to replacement, or maybe you start to look at if it's across 60 to 70% of your parking lot, you might have to really replace that whole parking lot, or kind of, as I mentioned earlier, that interim where you can kind of mill the edges. So you bring a big machine in and they mill around the edges, mill around the pieces, and then they'll lay like an inch topping over that. But it's a Band-Aid, right? I mean, it's a good Band-Aid, but
it's 7 to 10 year Band-Aid normally.
Yep. And if we're going to turn that asset, maybe that gets us through that next due diligence period. Yep. Because ultimately those parking lots can be a couple $100,000 as well. And probably, and I'll kind of say it this way, a lot of your clients, that's what they see, your tenants. And so that'll be one of their big issues, that they're like, hey guys, you need to fix this parking lot before I'm going to re-sign my next lease extension. Or if they're new coming in, do you want to look at a property that's got all kinds of breaking up, pavement? Or do you want to move into a building that's nice and fresh and clean? And we had that with our group over at Quarry Center, right? That was a big prerequisite of theirs, is they wanted that parking lot to look good. And so do we as owners. Doors and windows, right? A lot of due diligence with that, understanding, if I look at a window, and I'm just peering out the window at our office here, if I see staining as I'm walking around the tenancy on the inside, if I see staining, I'm going, what's going on? Why is the drywall all puckered up in the corners by the windows? Probably a good indication we have some leaking going on.
Yep.
And with the windows, if you're a single story, some 4x4 punch windows, pretty cheap and easy to replace, throw a couple $1,000s a piece on. But when you get into an asset like Egondale, which is right off the end of the runway at Minneapolis Airport, those windows get to be a little bit more expensive. And what is the cost of those?
Oh man, what was it? Was every pane $5,000?
I think it was like $5,000 a pane, right?
It was $5,000, and it only made sense to do a bunch at a time, because you're bringing in booms and you're bringing in things to get it up there.
Yep.
But also when you place a piece of glass, like this one's fine, right? Because there's none in front of it. What do you do when there's a desk in front of it? Mm-hmm. Oh, now we got to pay to move the desk, and then pay to move it back after it's completed. So, to your point, windows are always a trouble thing, because it's the one that nobody ever catches, right? Because it's not easy to be seen until you're like digging in and looking at every single window, because you can't really see with the naked eye, like from the outside. You can see some of the caulking, right, which we run into a lot with Minnesota, because everything shrinks and whatever else. But it's tough with windows, because all CapEx to some degree. Do you make money on CapEx?
No. It's all reimbursement.
It's all cost, right? It's just added cost to the building. You buy a building for $1 million, and you got to do $400,000 of CapEx. You basically bought it for 1.4. Mm-hmm. That's your new basis. And you don't make any money on it.
And the windows, ultimately, there's one telling point, but it's somewhat tough to see sometimes if they're fogged up, right? You'll walk through and you'll be scanning the outside of the building, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, why do those two windows look so different? Maybe get a little bit closer, you'll see that they're fogged up, the seals are broken, the argon gas has maybe gone out of it, moisture is, got into it.
Whatever it is.
Yep. But yeah, windows, window heads, the caulking around it, definitely a big pain point. So we call it in the industry the envelope, right? So the envelope of the building is everything that kind of wraps the building. So it's the siding, the bricks, the roof cap on down the sidewall, and everything to do with that. And really, when we're looking at those things, there's a couple of very specific things. Number one, I'm looking for cracks, right? Why is this corner of the building cracked up? And can the sellers, have they owned it long enough that they can represent what that crack is from? Or can you look at it and say, okay, this crack has been painted over and I'm not seeing the paint separated again, so I can tell that crack has probably been there from the day the building was built,
yeah.
right? So probably not something I'm going to put a lot of concern to. But then the other telltale sign is along the side of the buildings, we'll see control joints. And those control joints are filled with a rod backer and some caulk. And so all of a sudden, if that rod back or that caulking is like separated and it's cracked all the way up, or it's just missing in some cases, probably a good indicator something's moving in the building a little bit. And also it could be just that the control joint caulking has fallen out, it's failed.
Yeah, it's old, right?
Could be 25 years old. At that point, you're going to recaulk the building anyhow.
Yeah.
But recalking a building, depending on what size that asset is, could be $25,000 to $100,000.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of people that do that anymore. So
No, there's not.
There's a lack of good tradespeople in the caulking industry. HVAC. HVAC is a subject that I don't think we go through one project and don't get into a discussion over. The buildings, the larger buildings, we've got, chiller towers, heat pumps. Simple buildings, we've got some rooftop units, kind of easy to look at them. You can get a quick assessment. When we're buying these large assets, in your opinion, what's the best way to protect yourself on chiller tower heat pumps in that case?
Yeah, I mean, for us, what we've changed this a few times throughout the time, but what we do now is whoever the vendor is, we'll usually start with either a conversation with them, and then from that, and if the owner will allow us to talk with the current vendor, which sometimes they will not. So either way, whether it's a current vendor or a vendor that we we will have them basically on site for a full day if it's a big enough building, right? Well, they will go through, look at the chiller tower, look at the boiler, look at the heat pumps, look at the HVAC units, to at least get some kind of an assessment, like do they work? How are they operating, right? So it might cost us a couple grand to do that work every single time, but that sometimes is the stuff that you go back to the seller on, right? Because it's, the building's got to operate. All of a sudden, if half of the HVAC units don't work, okay, well, we're buying an operating building, like your HVAC units don't work, you got to pay to get them repaired to be in working condition.
Yep.
Those are usually fair and reasonable things to look at.
And I think the other thing that we've learned over the years is that the seasonality of the purchase also affects what we're going to do with HVAC, right? Because we've had chiller towers that literally were supposed to be drained. They weren't drained all the way, and a valve is stuck and they freeze.
Yep.
Or you can't test them, right? So I mean, there's no physical way you're going to, in 30 below weather, fill the chiller tower.
Yep.
And notice if it's leaking all over the place, right? So those are sometimes challenges, and that's why talking to that HVAC vendor that's been maintaining it for the last 10 years or whatever the time is, can at least give you some pretty good insight going, hey guys, this hasn't been a problem, it's been operating. And you can also look at the records if the sellers are willing to give it to you going, listen, they've been putting in 10 grand a year on these units, they're in good shape, because for the most part, like an RTU or rooftop unit, you can replace everything down to the box, right? I mean, you can almost gut the thing and buy each part, literally take it apart, replace it, to the point that if the heat exchangers finally crack, the unit itself is probably so old you can't even get replacement parts anymore.
Yeah.
Then you take it off the roof and you make a full replacement. But
Correct.
Otherwise, you can break them down to the parts.
Yeah, your
themselves.
simple ones you can band-aid all the way through pretty much until a major thing happens where it's a certain percentage of the actual cost of it. Then it's like, okay, now let's just replace it and move on. But HVAC is always a big one. A lot of times it's, especially at least with chiller towers, yes, our seasonality is big with them, but a lot of the times if they're not working right, it's because of age and rust, right? So you can see it. So ones that we've seen that have been failing, like they have rust on them, they've rusted out. There's holes in them, there's issues with them. So then we can go back and be like, okay, well, we know that this is the issue. You can kind of start pricing in some kind of a fix or a replacement, but just like the next one we'll get to, the biggest issue with this one is time. I can't get a chiller tower tomorrow. I can't even get a big unit tomorrow. Some of that stuff's gotten a little bit better, but like a chiller tower we just replaced down in one of our office buildings, it was 12 weeks for just the part, or just the custom build for our building.
So think about if that chiller tower fails midsummer and it's 85 degrees out.
You are screwed.
You're putting in temp air conditioning, or worse, your tenants are going, hey, we're
I'm
leaving.
gone. Because what's the biggest issue that we hear from tenants? Temperature.
HVAC, temperature
Because
control.
your 70 isn't my 70, but I'm sitting next to a window, so I feel like I'm at 80,
Yep.
and I'm gonna complain.
And we've literally built brand new buildings that we opened up, and within the first 2 weeks, and we've put hugely custom designed HVAC systems in them. And I think people are just more attentive to when they're cold, they're gonna say something, or hot, they're gonna say something. And exactly to your point, your 70, my 70 are not the same temperatures. And so trying to get an office building of 100 people to modulate properly and to make all of them feel comfortable.
It's impossible. It's never gonna happen.
Yep. Fire suppression, not a lot with that one other than just understand that you've got fire suppression in your building or you don't. The big things I look for that is just making sure that the yearly inspections have been done.
The 1 in 5s.
The 1 in 5s, yep. And so making sure that I can see tags on there or I can find the vendor that did it. Usually they'll sticker the heck out of them. They're really proud of their stickers. So they'll put stickers all over the fire suppression, the riser pipe as we call it, that they'll identify who's been there and who's been doing the work. But there'll always be, or should always be, a tag of the at least 1 year inspection on that pipe somewhere, on that valve, so you know it's been inspected in the last year.
Yep.
But really, again, with that, it's just understand, does your building have it? Because if your building doesn't have it, and I look at our building here, does not have it, not that that's bad, it's just when the codes were in place for this size of building, they didn't require it. And the use usually will also determine if there's a need for sprinkler. But that also means that there's most likely no large pipe coming from the street into your building. So therefore, a lot less moving parts, a lot less leaks. We've walked into some sprinkler riser rooms and there's water pouring out of the seals and the gaskets of the sprinkler or the fire suppression system, and it's a lot, right? And rebuilding some of those are pretty tricky. And then to break it down real quick, then there's really 2 types of fire suppression systems, right? There's a wet system and then there's a dry system. And maybe just quick, what's the difference between the 2 just for the viewers?
So you think of it, a wet system, easy, simple, right? It's filled with water. Mm-hmm. The dry system is not. What's a dry system filled with?
So dry systems of years gone past were filled with just air, right?
Yeah.
And so they're primarily used when there's a potential where they're outside, where they might freeze, and so you can't have it obviously full of water outside. So the whole system is actually baffled at the main shutoffs, and so if one of those heads breaks, instead of losing water pressure, they lose air pressure. And then it takes about 30 seconds for the water to flow over and fill those heads and start spraying. Today they'll use nitrogen, some other types of gases to fill them so that they don't rust, but they've also moved now into using plastic pipe for a lot of the systems. So they're not using the old Schedule 40 metal pipes because they do rust from inside out eventually. And so they've moved primarily to all plastic. But yeah, understanding if you've got a wet system and dry system just means that there's more maintenance costs on that dry system because you've got an air compressor that's literally pressurizing that pipe
pretty much the whole time.
Running all the time. And if it is running all the time, that's already a great indicator that you got a problem because that air pressure shouldn't be leaking out of that fire suppression system. And I see you kind of smirk because, again, we've ran into these problems.
I've seen them, yeah.
You walk in and you hear this air compressor running like, oh, that shouldn't happen.
We need to bring the vendor over right away.
Somebody's got a big problem.
Because if the air compressor stops working, what happens?
It releases water. And the sprinklers will start going.
Yep.
There's no magic stop point at that sprinkler head. It will be pouring water out. The structure itself, really for those, we just want to understand what it is. Is it a metal superstructure? Is it precast? What are the floor systems made of? Because sometimes you'll look at office buildings and they'll have a post-tension system with cables running through those floors that are basically, once they pour the concrete, they'll actually pull these giant, what is the word I'm looking for? Like they'll pull tension on those cables so that they can actually put a camber to the floor so then it holds it up. If you're drilling through those floors and all of a sudden hit one of those cables, it's going to come flying out the side of the building because the tension is massive that's being pulled on those cables. So just really understanding the structure, not that we're going to find any major failures, because if the structure's failing, you're going to see the cracks on the outside, you're going to see the water leaks because things are shifting.
Yeah.
But it's more about just an understanding of what that structure is, because then when you take it over and you have your contractors come in to renovate, you can advise them, or our asset managers or property managers can identify, hey, be careful of this.
Well, they're going to ask you what it is.
Yep.
Right? The contractor's going to ask you, what kind of building is it? Your insurance company's going to ask you, what kind of building is it? So you might as well know from the start, because somebody's going to ask you about it, because you have to know what it is to get insurance on it, right? Because that's how the insurance provider figures their stuff out. And for contractors, you have to know our engineering, so that when they go through their plans, they can figure out, do I need to do a scan of the floor before I do a concrete cut, or put a drain in, or whatever it is? And it's going to happen no matter what. So you might as well know what you're talking about.
And I've been in this industry now almost 35 years, and we're just buying a structure in the next couple months where it was a new style of system. I had never seen this building ever built this way. And so when you look at a building just going, yep, that's this structure, it's this, it's this, it's this, we get the structural drawings and we're like, whoa, this is a floor system that was designed specifically for that site, but something I had never seen before. So thinking you know everything, I was proved wrong in this asset, and and we're making provisions to make it work, not a big deal, but that knowledge of what it was really turned out to be something that was kind of cool, interesting, but also something I'd never seen before. So the one that makes you shudder, drum roll please. Isaac, you got a drum roll there? Oh, the elevator.
Yeah, the wonderful elevators. So the one that you never know what the cost is going to be, you never know what it will look like, and they just kind of happen, right? So elevators are one of the trickiest ones to me in all buildings, right? Because a roof you can see, mechanical systems you can pretty much understand, and you can repair them pretty fast, and they're not, I'm going to say, governed by the mob to some degree. And then you get elevators, right? The one that, you have pits, you got cables, you got oil, you got all this stuff, and only elevator vendors can touch them, and there's only certain people that can touch them depending on what brand you have. Because, this group only works with this, and this group only works with this, which is perfect job security for them. But the cost is crazy. I mean, to get something repaired, a building that we just did a modernization on, I think we've changed out the oil or done something to the oil 3 or 4 times, and every single time it's 10 grand.
Yeah.
It's just, there's 10 grand. Just change out the oil. Okay.
And why, right?
Why,
what's
right?
going on?
They don't tell you why. There's, it doesn't work, and this is why, and they hope it's right, and if it's not, well, here's the next thing you got to do in replace. And you can't bring somebody else in because it's their elevator.
Kind of shade tree mechanic, right? Let's just, the truck's not running, let's start with changing the spark plug wires, and then that doesn't work. Okay, let's change the spark plugs, and you just keep on changing
Except
and changing.
spark plug is $20.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The oil, you can't get these people to come on site for less than $2 grand. So
and it's happened to me, and I don't know if it's happened to you, but like we literally can't go in the elevator pit and change the light bulb in the elevator pit.
No.
That is governed by the state elevator gods, right?
Yep.
I guess I'd call it. But yeah, it's a difficult one, and even when we're looking to build a new building and we're looking at elevator vendors, one of our biggest questions now is not how does your elevator work or how fast is it, what are the things all about it. It's what kind of service agreements are we going to be bound to you on, and those service agreements are ungodly expensive, and they'll tie you up for 3 to 5 years sometimes to that elevator contractor. And so whatever the cost is,
it's just the cost.
It's just the cost.
And it doesn't cover everything.
Right.
It covers some stuff, not everything. Right. You got to repair. It's on you still.
So do your elevator if your building's got an elevator, do your due diligence. I would even suggest you can bring a different elevator company in and just have them tell you what this other elevator company is like, because it might be a Kone or a Schindler or something like that. Have them just tell you what's the goods and the bads of that elevator. It's free, but at the end of the day, you're still bound to the people that are taking care of that elevator to do the service on it. But it just gives you a different lens maybe of like, oh yeah, these elevators are synonymous with this failing or this thing going wrong or something else with it. But yeah, typically you're not going to be replacing the elevator cab, right? It's going to be the pumps, the cables, the shivs, all of the things that kind of make up the mechanics of that elevator. The buttons, right? The connectivity of that elevator sometimes is what's the problem. And so all of those things are just greatly expensive.
And like the chiller tower, it's actually worse, right? So if you got to get it, we call it modernized, right? You get your elevator modernized, it's 20 plus weeks out, right? So you wait too long with your elevator, all of a sudden it doesn't work. Well, you got to wait 20 weeks. So if you have a 5-story building, how are people getting up and down the stairs?
Yep.
Do you have a clinic that people like that gets ADA requirements, or there's different access codes that need to be happening? Those tenants aren't walking up the stairs, right? So you got to make sure your elevator works. And yeah, you have 2 elevators, right? Usually. Well, if one is down, how fast does the other one move? And if the one doesn't work, well, that one probably isn't in very good condition too. So if that one's overworked, it's usually the next one to stop working. And then it might take 2 weeks to get a stupid part from the elevator company, right? So that's one of those things that we've changed to from our company is we won't work with groups that are tied to a certain product. We'll go find the unbranded groups so that they put in a modernization or they do a repair, anybody can work on it. It doesn't have to be tied to a specific brand to work on it. Just to give us more flexibility.
Yep. So pivoting to one of the last things that we look at, and it's not something we put a lot into, but it's also the thing that people see the most, which is landscape, right? You drive up to a building and you're like, wow, this is beautiful, right? The flowers and all that stuff. It's great, but somebody's maintaining that, right?
Yeah.
And so not only the maintenance, but then if there's dead trees and there's shrubs to be pulled and there's stuff, putting those dollars into that CapEx or into the operating budgets and understanding where that's going to get reimbursed from is pretty important, right?
Yeah, I know, it's extremely important because who wants to, you drive into a building, you're going to work, you're going to go meet with a new potential business that you want to do business with, or you're an employee, or you're a business owner, you have employees, potential hires coming to your building, and they drive into your parking lot, and in the islands, all they see is dead trees and no mulch. What does that look like, right? It's an optic, right? To me, speaking on office side, office buildings are meant to be able to attract, retain, and hire staff. That's what office buildings are for. They gotta look good. They have to be warm and inviting because always people don't want to come to the office, right? With medical, it has to look top tier on the outside, right? Because it's like, okay, if you're not taking care of the outside of your building and your clinic is inside, what does that mean to the clinic, right? It's all optics.
How are you taking care of me?
It looks bad outside, like does that mean that the doctors inside, like, are good or bad, or what does it look like, right? So it's like it's a doubt thing that you don't want to have people have to go with when they're going into your actual building that you're operating out of.
Yeah. And the last one to wrap up, the trash, right? Trash is a thing that's a byproduct of every building we own. People have to get rid of their garbage, their recycling, things like that. And so understanding a couple different things. Where's the traffic route that the dumpster drivers are coming in? What size are the dumpsters? Where are they hidden? A lot of people don't see them, but those enclosures that are sitting in those parking lots are sometimes pretty good size, and they never look good. They're always beat up. They're always trashed. The dumpster drivers are masters of like pulling the gates open with their big trucks and backing up, and they'll rip the gates off. And
the ground is black and it looks disgusting. It stinks.
And sometimes if you got restaurants, you got grease traps. I mean, the grease is running out the side. So it's really just understanding those elements of it so you can make sure you are either in step with the understanding of how your tenants are bringing garbage out and that operating, or are there things that you have to do to those dumpster enclosures to fix them before you're taking it over?
Yeah, no, I would agree, and that's a good recap on just like everything that we look at, right? Because it's, to me, one of those things. Commercial real estate investing or real estate investing in general is not passive. I don't care what people say. It's still active. Like,
very active.
Yes, it's cash flow and it's all the wealth, building stuff, but it's still very active. I mean, it can be passive if you hire the right people to do the things for you, right? Because otherwise, if we're buying a deal in California, right, are we flying to California? Yes, because that's just who we are. We want to see it on site, right? But if you're not, well, who's looking at the building, right? Who's looking at the roof? Who's looking at all the other things for you? Nobody? So you're just going to assume that it's okay? Well, assuming doesn't work for me or for you, right, from those instances. So finding good vendors that can help through a due diligence process is so keen, right?
Yeah.
And that can be companies like us. There's other companies out there that do these kinds of things, but finding a group that you like that will come with you or that you can hire and they will go to the building and complete a report for you so that then you can go to the site and be like, this doesn't look good, this doesn't look good. I need a $100,000 deduct so that you're taken care of, right?
So to wrap it up, Inventure Real Estate, if you are interested in getting into passive commercial real estate, right, we take those things off your plate. So we take the active engagement with the assets and doing the due diligence and things like that to create the investment so that the investors can stay passive in their investments, right? So if you're buying a Walgreens with us, you're investing in a commercial office building or an industrial building, and you want passive income, cash flow on a monthly basis, we're a team to look at for those investments if you're interested.
We can take everything off of your plate when you're looking to get into real estate, whether you want to own it yourself or with us, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. You want to close this out, Austin?
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for listening and watching here this morning. Again, like, subscribe to all the platforms that we have, from our YouTube to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so forth. And let's keep following along and send us messages if there's things that you want to talk about.